After spending nearly 10 years in higher education as a researcher, professor, and administrator focusing on issues of diversity and inclusion, Dr. Pogue expanded his work to include multi-generational leadership with the goal of helping companies prepare, recruit, and retain millennials and now Generation Z. In 2015, Dr. Pogue started JP Enterprises, a consulting firm that provides strategy, leadership, and solutions for clients navigating through the diversity journey. Whether in the form of consult, content development, workshops, webinars, or keynotes, JP Enterprises has a cadre of seasoned professionals with deep backgrounds across industries to help their clients move forward while keeping them the right kind of uncomfortable. And I was lucky enough to meet Dr. Pogue at a CUNA training event last October, where he gave a similar presentation what he's going to give today. And he's absolutely an amazing person to listen to. So please, Dr. Pogue, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy days. I know everybody could have had something else to do, whether it was that next cup of coffee or a nap or a time with friends or family, colleagues, et cetera. So these professional development opportunities, sometimes they can seem like they're all over the place and we can get it all the time. So I do appreciate when people choose to spend time listening to something that I might have to say. We're going to spend the next, I guess it's 51 minutes, 56 minutes or so, chatting about inclusive leadership from a marketing perspective, or inclusive marketing. And really the idea that you as the marketer, if you are more inclusive, it allows or requires, or the output that you have becomes more inclusive. And there isn't a sort of an add water and stir opportunity to this work. It's really a process. So what I'm going to, by process, I mean, I'm going to introduce some things that we can continue to work on, both individually and collectively. And what I would ask is, if you can, would love to see your face. I know that right now people are blocked out, but and you all may have sort of an internal culture of, hey, it's okay, well, I'm just gonna move around and listen to this while I'm making a cup of coffee or moving around. But if you choose, I'd love to see your faces, and that would be great. If not, I understand that is how things are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the presentation now. And good to see you, Tim, Sarah, so appreciate that. But if others can join the face-to-face so we can chat with each other, that would be wonderful. Oh, here we go. Seth, Michael, Justin, Kyle. It feels like, what was it? Was it the romper room when you said, hi, Michael and Kyle and Joshua and Daniel and Kimberly and Shen and Valerie and Mike. It is romper room, right? Do I have that right?
I think you do, yeah.
us people that are a certain age bracket. Okay, so I'll kick off the presentation now. And at the end, we will have time for questions. But please, if I'm saying something that you're like, hey, wait, I that wasn't clear to me, either throw your hand up or come off mute and say, hey, James, I apologize for interrupting, or just jump in and say what you need to say. No problems, no issue, because I may not be able to see you because I may be focused on the presentation. So with that as a sort of rules of the road, we will jump off this cliff together. All right. And if you wouldn't mind, a couple thumbs up from anybody just to let me know that you can see the presentation, that'd be great. Anybody?
Not yet.
Not yet. What about now? Looks like we're
there we go. Got it.
There we go. Go up. There. Okay. All right. So again, we're going to be talking about authentically inclusive marketing. And how do we create that content? How do you create the content that reflects diverse communities in a variety of ways? And what does diverse mean? And how are we making sure that we're crossing T's and dotting I's? Because your neighborhood of diversity might be different from the neighborhood of someone else. So as a former teacher, I like to think about starting with the end in mind. So what does the end mean in this case? When we complete this time together, I'm hoping that you are, one, willing to learn more. This is not the end of any of our inclusive education. I continue to learn things, if not every day, probably multiple times a day, where somebody is kind enough to help me see something differently or better, or see a gap that I have. The second is to recognize you do not have to be an expert to be a leader in this quote unquote inclusion space, right? And last, as far as our outcomes for today anyway, is to introduce a couple tools for you that you can use to engage in these DEI related conversations, right? We all need as many tools in our toolbox as possible. Some are sharper than others. We use them more often, but with the more tools we have, the better. So I'm going to ask us to enter this conversation that we're having today and as a tool for you to do it moving forward in good faith. And what do I mean by good faith? The first thing I mean is with openness and honesty. And I mean, be as open and as honest about your challenges, your success, the risks that you've taken, the challenges that you have as possible. And if you are one of those people that has raised her hand and said, I'm a leader, follow me, right? Then that much more openness and honesty is required of you because you said that's what you wanted to do, right? So with openness and honesty. Second is with vulnerability. And what I mean by vulnerability is not the kind where I might say, hey, here's something that happened to me in my past. It really impacts how I lead. It impacts how I follow. It impacts how I operate in the world. That's great. And I'm asking you for the kind of vulnerability that comes with risk. When I say to Mike, hey, Mike, when we were having lunch the other day, you made a couple comments that I'm not really clear on, and they were a little scratchy to me. So I'm wondering if you could help me unpack how you came to be thinking or that way. That kind of risk, that kind of vulnerability, to make a bet on your relationship with the person across from you, to make a bet on the leadership that you have, to make a bet on the fact that you raised your hand and said, I'm going to be the leader, and I therefore I'm going to take more risks than other folks. And sometimes, maybe oftentimes, in public. The next is empathy. Now, the kind of empathy I'm going to ask you to strongly consider and really, really work towards is cognitive, not the emotional one. Cognitive versus emotional empathy. I'm going to pause here and see if somebody might want to give me their thinking on the difference between cognitive and emotional empathy. Anybody want to jump off mute or throw their hand up there and give a thought on what do you think in your space, the difference between cognitive versus emotional empathy? Anybody? I can pick. I suppose I'll have to pick. Seth, I'm going with you because I like your beard game.
Thank you so much. I'm not positive, but in my mind, cognitive empathy might be kind of where you start from thinking about somebody in particular, or thinking about folks versus expressing it as an emotion. So it's a little bit more subliminal. I might be totally wrong, but it's what came to my mind first.
Whatever you think. And what about you, Kimberly E? I don't want to mispronounce your last name, but do you have a thought on the difference between cognitive and emotional empathy? What are your thoughts?
I think that cognitive empathy sounds like it would be more about maybe thinking about their perspective a little bit more and taking the time to understand their frame of context when anyone is expressing their thoughts, opinions, and where they're coming from, as opposed to emotional empathy, which could be driven, purely by emotion. So
Gotcha.
It's really just from the heart more than contextually.
I appreciate that. And how about one more? Karen?
I'll take a stab at it if you'd like.
Oh, who's that? Who's that?
It's Tammy.
Okay, Tammy, what do you have for us?
I'm thinking that cognitive empathy is something that we know, like if someone has a situation, we know that we need to feel empathy toward this person. It's cognitive, it's a learned skill. We know that that person needs some empathy. And I believe the emotional empathy is actually feeling that for them.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you all for that. I'll be jumping back in with us to sort of check in and ask questions as we go. What I would like for us to agree on for today, and you can decide if you want to take this definition and ride with it for yourself or for your organization, but for today, I would ask if we could agree that cognitive empathy is our ability, my ability, your ability to understand what someone is feeling, to understand the logic of what they're thinking or why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. The math equation that got them to feel this way, that we can work on that. versus emotional empathy, which is my ability to feel what someone else is feeling, right? And with cognitive empathy, I think we can always make that effort. We can always stumble towards trying to figure out whether or not I can understand why it is that he feels this way about fishing with his son. I don't fish, maybe I don't have a son, but can I do the math equation as to why that is so important to him, right? Even though I don't do it at all. Versus emotional empathy. He loves fishing with his son. My dad used to fish with me. His dad used to fish with him. I fish with my son. I get it. I understand why he feels that way from an emotional perspective. I have an emotional connection. So for today, can we agree that cognitive empathy is our ability to understand what someone is feeling versus emotional empathy, which is our ability to feel what someone else is feeling? Is that okay? Thumbs up. I see a few thumbs up. C. Morgan, I see you. Joshua, thank you so much. All right, great. So next, we want to be able to go into this work without knowing what the results will be. We know that going over this hill is where we need to be for ourselves, for our profession, for our organization. Not exactly sure what's exactly over there, but we know that way is the way to go, right? So openness and honesty as much as you can bring to the table. And if you raised your hand and said, follow me, I'm a leader, that much more. With vulnerability, the kind that requires risk and your ability to take that risk. With cognitive empathy, your drive towards understanding what is happening with the person or the organization or the group across the table, and without knowing what the results will be. This is what I mean when I say good faith. So if you wouldn't mind for me, grab your phones if they happen to be close by and do this. Send it to, you don't have to, but I'd like for you to, if you don't mind. Send a text to the phone number 22333. Send a text to the phone number 22333. The text will be James Pogue, Pogue 065. 065. You'll get a text back that says, woohoo, you're in, right? So the phone number is 22333. The text that you're going to send is James Pogue, Pogue 065. Is anybody in? Anybody? People in? If you're getting in the chat, if you wouldn't mind throwing your hand up, say, hey, I'm in, that'd be great. Anybody? Nobody?
Working on it.
I see you, Joshua. Tim,
I'm
thank
in.
you so much.
I'm in.
WBROCHU. Not sure how we pronounce that one, but I appreciate you for being in.
It's Wendy, but my last
Wendy.
name is Brochu.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. And I see folks in the chat. Great. So we're in. All right. So on the next slide, when it comes up, there's going to be a question there. It's somewhat controversial. So just prepare for the controversy on the next slide, right? It's a little testy. But the way that you're going to respond is by sending A, B, C, D, or E, whatever the selection you want, and send it as a text. You don't have to hit the link that came up in your text at all. Just send A, B, C, or D and send the text. If you change your mind, send a different text, right? Is everybody good with the rules of the road? All right, here we go. This may be too hot for some people. Cornbread or biscuits? According to my grandmother, there is only one possible answer to this question, and all other answers are wrong. To level set, she's a woman from Louisiana, North Louisiana. She's about 96, 95, 96. I'm supposed to know that information. Bad for me. 1098, 765, 4, 3, 2, and 1. According to grandma, let me see here, 33% of these folks on this call are wrong. Absolutely 100% wrong. In her mind, the idea is that it takes, in order to make great cornbread, you have to have this iron skillet that probably is handed down by 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 generations deep. You can get a good biscuit, pretty good biscuit in a lot of places, but for cornbread, you got to put all this extra work into it. And as a result, cornbread beats biscuits every time. Is anybody in stark disagreement with me? Anybody want to veto what grandmama's saying? Anybody? No pressure. Tell me my grandma's wrong. I see you, Joshua. It looks like you might be about to drop off a cliff and say, my grandmother is wrong. No. All right. So now that we know our technology is working and that most of you all in agreement with my grandmother, we can move forward. So next question. When you think backwards to the summer of 2020 and thinking about you and your leadership around the social justice challenges during that time, how might you score yourself? How might you score yourself? You're thinking back during the summer of 2020, looking at yourself and saying, all right, here's who I was, here's what was going on, here's what I did or didn't do, here's the kind of score I might give myself. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. All right, I'm going to ask us to pull our thumbs back off of the phones for just a minute. We'll go to the next question, and then we'll do some compare and contrast. Thinking about your leadership today around social justice challenges, what kind of grade would you give yourself today? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, so I'm going to ask us to pull our thumbs back, and I'm going to ask a couple questions for you to respond to. And again, if you want to throw your hand up so that we can try to avoid talking over people, that'd be great. And I'll try to call on those people I can call on. What do you see as I toggle back and forth between these screens? What do you see? This is what we thought of ourselves back then in 2020. This is what we think about ourselves today. What do you see, if anything? Anyone who want to throw their hand up or pop off mute?
I'll interject there.
Please.
I think we definitely see a improvement from the 51 to 75 up to the 76, 90, but there's definitely still room for improvement.
Okay. Others? Or if you want to type something into the chat, that's fine too. That'd be great too. Wendy, I see you coming off mute.
I think the same thing that Mike just said. I think the difference between the two, I hope, just represents growth.
Okay. Let me insert another question. How might I have asked these questions differently, better, so that you could have given a more refined response, a more specific response, whatever it might be? How could I have done this better so that you could have received the information in a way that made better sense for you, right? Or for folks in your profession? What do you think? What might have been a way to make these questions better? Wendy, let me come back to you, just because you still happen to be off mute.
Yeah, I don't know that I have an answer for that. I think the social justice piece speaks loudly to everybody. I don't think I have an answer to that.
Joshua, what do you think?
I think that the society impact, that the need to get better.
And how is there a way that this question could have been framed better so that it could have landed better with you and you could have given maybe a slightly different response? I don't know. What could this question have been improved in some way?
May I jump in?
Well, let me just tighten up on see what Joshua has to add, and then please come in right after.
I think that perhaps it's I don't know, maybe difficulties with going back to looking at previous history first, as opposed to scoring yourself without the time frame.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So giving some sort of historical context of this is what it was like then, and then we get to 2020, and now we get to now. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, I
yeah.
like that. I like that. Who wanted to jump in? I'm sorry, I didn't see a face pop up. Who was that?
It was me, Kimberly.
Okay, Kimberly, please.
One, I think Josh's, it's a really good point, but I also think that having the question maybe really think about actual actions taken, not just how you feel about the subject in general. Saying based on your actual actions, how would you rate yourself?
Sure. So I did these 5 things, and maybe that was in 2020. This time I did 10 things, or I did 5 things twice as often, right? Some kind of way of being more clear about that. And then Robin, I see that in the chat, you put more specific details about what I mean by social justice. Am I talking about related to healthcare? Am I talking about relating to some of the age different related things that were happening, race related things that were happening? What exactly was I meaning by that? Those are all great pieces of feedback. And it leads us to this place where if we're not careful, we can put ourselves in a position where we are talking across one another because we haven't baselined our language well. I say social justice and you think healthcare. But what I meant was some version of race or some version of age, or I meant religion or, right? And so now we're headed off in 2 completely different directions. And we're not able to communicate well. Those of us that have had interesting conversations with family members, colleagues, friends about sticky issues, we know how quickly things can get off the rails because there was a misunderstanding at the beginning. Baselining language is so critical and important. So we're going to spend a little bit of time doing that, but consider this as a second tool in your toolbox. When you are doing your work, do the people that you're speaking to, that you're marketing towards, know what you mean when you say X, whatever that is? All right. So when we do this work at JP, we call this DIBS model, DIBS meaning diversity, inclusion, and bias or belonging. And we know that if we want to shift the culture, improve results, or change results or improve outcomes, what's happening on the right-hand side of your screen, we must start on the left-hand side with meaningful interactions with people, places, and systems. This might be a great example of a meaningful interaction between people, right? Systems might be when you dig into your HR system. How do you hire people? How do you recruit people? What is the system? What is the process that you use? How do you promote people? Do you do a regular pay equity study? You have a meaningful relationship with that system, with the place. Some of us have gone to visit different places in the world and you come back a changed person because that place had a meaningful interaction with you. Now, these meaningful interactions put us in a place of having our beliefs challenged or maybe reinforced. I have a friend, he's from Savannah, Georgia, and he is a serious religious faith-first guy. He goes over to Japan, and I say, hey, tell me a story about your experience. And he says, James, I was going up the temple going up the stairs to this temple. And when we got to the top, the tour guide says, this temple is over 3,000 years old. And I'm thinking, that's cool, but I don't understand why that's the story you're telling me. And he says, James, where I'm from, how I was raised, what I believe in, the world is not 3,000 years old. I said, oh, okay, right? He had his beliefs challenged, right? And then from there, he's got to make some decisions around how is his behavior going to shift. And then over time, we get to a place of shifted culture, different outcomes, different results. We have meaningful interactions with people, places, or systems. They challenge or reinforce our beliefs. That impacts, pokes, scratches, shifts our behavior and our decision-making, enhances our behavior and decision-making. And over time, sometimes too slowly for some of us, we get to different results, outcomes, or culture. That's the model that we use to introduce all this work, to the foundation for it. Now, diversity and inclusivity, again, baselining language. It is important that we're speaking for the same sheet of music. So for today, I'm going to ask you to consider this idea that diversity is everything about you and I that makes us similar or different. Height, hair color, favorite color, kind of car you drive. Whether you got 5 siblings or you have 2 siblings, you have no siblings, right? All of that matters when it comes to diversity. All of it is part of who you are. Meanwhile, when it comes to inclusivity, inclusivity is the level of belonging in your marketing, the level of belonging in you as a marketer that's driven by you, your key performance indicators, your policies, your practices, the way things really get done, and your procedures. Diversity, everything about you and I that makes us similar and different. Inclusivity, the level of belonging. Do I belong to you? Do you belong to me? Do we belong to each other as a team? That's driven by you as a leader, your key performance indicators, your policies, your practices, and your procedures. Are we okay with that, with my logic on that? The cognitive empathy, right? Okay, great. I see heads nodding. Now, next, I do say that diversity is everything about you and I that makes us similar or different. But I also believe, and the lesson from this slide is that some components of diversity are more impactful than other ones. Every day of the week, my age is more impactful to how the world sees me and how I see the world than my age is more important than my favorite color. My religious predilections, whether I go to the mosque or I go to the temple or I go to the church or either I don't go anywhere at all, is more impactful to how the world sees me and how I see the world than the color of my car. Some components of diversity are more impactful than others. Now, a couple sort of frequently asked questions around this graphic. Hey, James, where does family size fit into that? Underneath the socio part of socioeconomics. But I can also understand what somebody might say, like at your organization, where you're from, right? I think I saw, it was Justin, Maine Family Credit Union. You may say, look, family is so important here. We need to pull that out and highlight it. I'd say, yeah, go ahead, do that, 100%. What this graphic is saying, again, the lesson from this graphic, some components of diversity are more impactful than others. For you and the work that you do, you have to decide which ones you're going to highlight and which ones you're not going to highlight, because we can't do everything. Let me pause here and just see if anybody has any reactions or thoughts around this particular graphic. Justin, since I called you out there around the Maine Family Federal Credit Union, I'll start with you. Have any thoughts? What might be missing? How does from this graphic, or how does it land with you?
Turn off my heater.
Justin, you have the heater going right now?
Yeah, it's hot outside, but they're cranking the AC, so it's a little chilly in my office.
Okay, all right. Carbon footprint, just a big old carbon footprint over there.
Yeah. Can you restate the question?
Sure. First is like, how does this graphic land with you? This idea that I'm saying that these are 9 areas of diversity that are more impactful than many others.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I generally think I agree. I mean, for me personally, I tend to prioritize the ones that are kind of naturally occurring rather than by choice. And I know that can be controversial. We have conversations about that. I mean, race versus religion, right? One is not a choice, one is. So we have regular conversations about that, some disagreements. But for me personally, I would always prioritize the ones that people don't have any control over, because I don't feel like I need to say because.
Sure. Now, so I can make sure that I'm tracking with you. Are you saying that I do that as, hey, that's what Justin does?
That's what Justin does. Yes.
Okay.
That's what Justin does. as a marketer, I have to balance it with my peers here internally and make sure that we're correctly representing the goals of our institution. I mean, we do have a lot of members who are religious. I mean, we used to be Holy Family Credit Union, which is associated with the Catholic Church. So we have to make sure that we're also being respectful, while also, I mean, it's a very careful balance to toe, because there's obviously some very strong disagreements. I mean, in most communities, you're going to see that. So trying to find that balance of making sure that people feel welcomed, but other people don't feel outcast.
I'm with you. And I think that what I'm hoping is that a graphic like this starts the conversation, right? We're going to build out a new marketing campaign that is designed to impact this group of people, right? Now, based upon that, what do we want to highlight? What do we want to push out? What are our pictures going to be? What are the colors we're going to use? There's I was going into Oklahoma City, and I came out of the airport, and there's this huge banner that covers an entire concourse from Tinker Federal Credit Union, and it's a father laying on the couch with the child on his chest, holding the child, and they're both kind of dozing. It's a really warm picture, right? So then I asked them as I was chatting with them, why that picture? Why there? Unpack it for me. And while we had a great conversation, what they weren't accustomed to is somebody asking those questions. Why a man and his child? Why at the airport? Is there one at the bus station too? Some might say that's different socioeconomic groups, right? Who are you marketing towards? What is the purpose? This father happened to be a man of color. Why? Was that purposeful? Was it not? What are we doing here? To talk it out. And you, as the people that are often responsible for these brilliant ideas that just come out of you because of the gifts that you have, we have to be able to explain that out to those of us that may be novices. That yes, you know what, we have a group of people that in Oklahoma City that they do a lot of traveling, their economics are in this place, and the trends are that they do this, and we can capture their attention by doing this. And we really want to highlight men. We got a lot of ladies who are coming in, but we think we're over indexed on that. We're 75% ladies, but we'd like that number to be 60-40 with 40% in men. So we want to push that. Oh, okay. That now it makes sense to me. All right. Does that seem reasonable to people as an approach? Amy, I see you nodding your head. You got a comment you might want to make? You nodded your head first. You won. Yay for Amy.
No, it makes sense. And I think at least I try to make those considerations, but in day-to-day moving forward, a lot of times it's just kind of, you just make the decision and move on.
Yep. And so I offer this to you again as a tool. Put it in your toolkit. Have it with your team maybe and say, okay, I'm just going to put this up here. We can ask whatever questions. Say, no, I didn't think about differing abilities, which that also encompasses, by the way, the disability framework, but also people that have maybe different skill sets and be very focused in particular areas. So it's all of that is encompassed there. And then geography is where people are from, right? Just so we're clear on that. Now, a little bit on intersectionality. Now, I recognize I separated each of these bubbles out. It's also important to understand we're all more than one bubble. We're all more than two bubbles. We're all more than 20 bubbles. We're all the bubbles. You all have to make the decision. Which ones are we going to highlight and why? And what I am finding over and over again is that people are not comfortable, not confident saying we're going to focus on men that are making over $75,000 a year who are fathers. Because by doing that, they feel like they're excluding women who may or may not have economic resources, who may or may not have children. One of the interesting things about inclusivity is that it requires exclusivity to work. Right? Think of any sport, especially like at the elite levels, everybody doesn't get to play in the NBA. You're not fast enough, you're not strong enough, you're not tall enough. Everybody doesn't get to be on the rowing team. Can't swim, right? Everybody doesn't get to do everything because some of it's exclusive. If you're not a creative person, it's probably really tough to be a marketer. Probably really tough. It's exclusive to people that have those gifts. Right? So keep in mind that you may have to make some of these decisions, and people are going to throw rocks at your face because you made a decision. And that's what happens when you say, I'm the leader, follow me. I have an idea I want to put out there. We have to take those risks. Remember, we talked about vulnerability. Now, the lesson from this slide is that you can't possibly know what your unconscious biases are. Otherwise, they would be conscious. Everybody okay with that one? All right, easy peasy on that one. Now, I want us to take a moment to assess how inclusive our industry is, or your industry is, and to some extent, how inclusive you might be. So, I gave you those 9 bubbles, but so that we can practice, I want us to focus. We're just going to use 1 or 2 bubbles. We're going to use gender and sexuality in the experiment that we're going to do about 3 slides from now. So you'll need this information. That for today, I'm going to ask us to accept these definitions for today. That a gender identity is how my personal sense of my gender, right? Meanwhile, my gender expression is how I communicate that, how I dress, my hairstyle, my clothes, my voice, right? Is not an indication of my identity, because I may say different than how I communicate, right? But my identity is what I think I am. My expression is how I execute that for other people. My orientation is my emotional, romantic, my feelings of attraction, right, for another group. I may not act on it at all. I may not act on it at all, but I have these feelings of attraction, right? And that's why when I say I'm not acting on all, that's why it's distinct from behavior. It's how I feel. It's not necessarily what I'm doing. Sex assigned at birth. Often those are in 3 categories: male, female, intersex, generally speaking, right? And then there's transgender, which is the bigger umbrella term for those people whose gender identity, how I identify, or my expression is different from what I was assigned when I was born. I was assigned a female at birth, but I don't think that that's who or what I am, and it's not how I express myself. Broadly speaking, that's transgender. For today, I'm going to ask that we just sort of organize ourselves around these thoughts, gender and sexuality. Now we're going to ask some different kind of questions around an assessment. So when we are assessing inclusivity, one, we can measure this thing, and that's what we're going to do here in a minute. After we get done with this assessment, you're going to be asked to put them into 5 different groups: hesitant, investigating, engaging, discomfort, experimenting. I'm going to explain what these are. Right? So I may end up in hesitant, I may end up in investigating or discomfort. A person can be in any different bubble at any time, and that's fine. We're going to use gender and sexuality as our lens. A person can end up in hesitant in gender and sexuality, or they may end up in discomfort. That's great. That's fine. The question is not necessarily where you are. It's where would you like to be? And then are you willing to walk the path between where you are and where you want to be? Let's get into that a little bit. So if I am in the hesitant space, again, we're just using gender and sexuality for this moment, but we can use this for any of the other bubbles. I would say I just want to be around people who are like me from a gender and sexuality perspective. I don't think that non-business conversations around gender or sexuality even belong in the office. I don't have issues with people who are different gender than me or different sexual orientation than me. I don't mind. I don't care. Do what you want to do. We just don't have a lot in common. Right? And I think that if I was to raise my hand and ask some questions about what are we doing in the office about this, why are we talking about this often or at all, I think I might get myself in big trouble. I might get myself quote unquote canceled. My kids might get embarrassed. My spouse might have to, what are you doing? Where people are calling me? I don't want to deal with that. Right? So as a result, I wouldn't offer, nor am I clear on any definition of diversity, inclusion, and bias. Then there's discomfort. For those people that are in the discomfort space, they might say, look, I'm around different people all the time of different genders and sexualities, but it's a challenge. It's tough for me. And when the non-business conversations about difference happen, it leaves me very uncomfortable. I do not see the business connection for why we're doing this or how we're doing this. I'm not there. And I don't think I get canceled or fired or anything like that if I was to raise my hand, but I might get embarrassed or admonished, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm just not going to do it. Then there are people in the investigating place. They're investigating like, hey, I am learning a lot as I'm thinking about and reading and talking with people that are with different gender, different sexualities. I'm learning a lot. I'm at the edges of understanding the business connection. Right? Somebody said to me, hey, we've got this LGBTQ group over here that has a bunch of interesting marketers. You should join. They got a bunch of great ideas. I went to the meeting. I learned a whole lot. I'm learning that there's a business connection there, but I'm at the edges of it. I want to learn more. I should learn more. Maybe I need to learn more, but I haven't closed the loop on it. I'm not doing all the things I could do, should do, know I probably should do. Then there's experimenting. Those people in the experimenting group are closing the loop. They're doing the hard work of listening to that podcast, reading that book, following different people on social media. They're saying, James, you're from a different gender or sexual orientation than I am. Can I take you to lunch? I'd like to know if I'm leading you well. I'd like to know if I'm hearing what it is that you have to say about certain aspects well. Because I'm not really understanding, I'm not really clear, I'm not really confident that I'm doing this in the best possible ways. Can you help me get better? They're doing that, which is risky. It is not easy, but they're executing on it. And as a result, they're getting more and more clarity on what diversity, inclusion, and bias are from the gender and sexuality perspective. For the engaging folks, they want to, need to, must be around different people all the time. If they're in a room full of people that are all of the same group, they want to go to the next room where there's a bunch of people of different groups. They understand that deeper connections between people make us more successful. And those deep connections happen when we are able to ask these interesting questions, sometimes awkward, sometimes scratchy, but they're willing to do it. They're willing to say, hey, James, can you help me understand this? Or if they need to have a corrective conversation with someone, hey, James, that's not the language we use over here. We use this language. So let me help you understand that better. They do it with as much grace as they can bring to the table, as much forgiveness and as much respect as they can bring to the table. Right? Investigating, discomfort, engaging, experimenting, hesitant, right? If you wouldn't mind grabbing your phones, if you already logged in, you don't have to do it again, but if you didn't, you're gonna dial 22333, and you're gonna send James POGUE 065 to that text, as a text, and you'll get something that says that you're in. Hopefully most people are already in. So I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind to rate your industry, broadly speaking, the industry of credit unions. When it comes to gender identity and sexuality, where do you think your industry is today? Where do you think your industry is today? Are we hesitant? Look, we just want to be around ourselves, whatever that means. Again, we're talking about gender identity and sexuality only for the moment. Are we in that experimenting place? We're working really hard, James. We're working hard, and we're gritting our teeth. We're making it work. Investigating. We're learning a lot, but we're not closing the loop on this thing yet. 10-9-8-7-6-5. 4-3-2-1-1-1-1-1-1. I'm going to ask us to pull our thumbs back for just a moment so I can go to the next screen. What about your organization, the one you work for, the one you're a leader in, the one you're doing the marketing for? Where are they? Where is your organization today? 10-9-8, 7-6-5, 4-4, 3-3, 2-2. 10-9-8, 7-6-5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Pull your thumbs back, pull your thumbs back. One more. What about you? The person who's sitting in your chair right now. Where are they with this gender identity and sexuality thing? Hey, James, these pronouns, man, it's driving me crazy. I was raised a certain way. I was educated a certain way. It's tough. I'm trying, but I'm just not there. James, I'm tired of trying. I tried last week. Right now, today, I'm not trying. I had a moment. I'm not trying today. Not today. Right? I'm just in an investigative place. It's good stuff, but I'm not willing to go there. right? Hey, there was one person in a credit union group. They happened to be a senior leader. They said, James, I really need to work on this, but I am struggling right now because my son just came out to me. And I'm in a tough spot right now, right? You're allowed to be exactly where you are. The question is, where would you like to be? The question is, where would you like to be? A couple comments, if you wouldn't mind pulling your thumbs back, pull your thumbs back. I'm going to toggle back and forth between these last three screens, and I'd love to get a few thoughts. And Shen Black, I'm going to come to you first. This is the industry. This is your organization that are represented here. And this is the individuals that are on the call that chose to respond. What do you see? What do you think?
Can you hear me? I don't know if my mic is working.
Yep, I got you.
I mean, obviously, I feel like the industry is kind of holding us back from where we are personally. My own organization, I know that it's kind of from the top up, like the board and everything, we get told to kind of not be so out there. So that's where we are personally, or where we are as an organization, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you. Sarah with an H. What do you think?
It is very interesting to see the differences in the responses. I mean, where I am, I feel like we work on somewhere between D and E every day. So.
And how about one more? Michael Connors, what do you think?
Hi, yes, thanks, James. Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with just trying to make many different groups of people happy at the same time. As we know, that's impossible. So, when we think of our, some of our more experienced members, maybe they lean on the more conservative side with some of this stuff. So we have to kind of scale it back and tone it down and be very careful and kind of tiptoe around some of these things when really, and personally, we want to be very open and progressive. Also, a lot of it's geolocation related. Our credit union is very spread out across the state of Maine. The more north you go in Maine, the more rural you get, and it gets very rural. And then the southern tip of Maine is, very, I wouldn't say very urban because it's all relative, right? But it's definitely more populated. We have our population centers more on the south of Maine. So it's a little bit more progressive. So it's this balancing act, right?
Gotcha. So as we're kind of getting to the wrap here, and I want to see if the folks had other questions. We've got about 8-9 minutes left. I wonder, and Karen St. Clair, I want to ask you this question, ask you to consider responding to this one first. If I change the lens from gender, sexuality to say, differing abilities, right? Everything from our autistic friends and family members to people that have visible physical challenges of one kind or another. Do you think that these bars would remain the same, or would they be dramatically different?
I think they would remain the same. Because we all have sensitivities to all of these things, I think, in basically the same way, person to person.
Gotcha. So if I'm hearing you right, so if I just take a look at this one, let me go back one, let's say this one for industry, the overall industry. If I'm hearing you right, I just want to make sure I'm tracking with you, that you would say, yeah, James, even when it comes to differing abilities, I think that about 11% of our industry would just prefer to be around people that are like them when it comes to differing abilities. Am I hearing you right, or am I not hearing you right?
No, I think you're hearing me right. Yes, I think you are.
Gotcha. Thank you. Other thoughts? If I shifted the lens to one of the other DIBS Big Nine, maybe it's race, maybe it's religion, maybe it's politics, maybe it's age. Would these bars, would these bars remain the same, or do you think there would be dramatic changes? Mike, I see you nodding pretty aggressively there. What do you have?
Yeah, I think there would be dramatic changes when you cycle through the different 9 points. You know, I think there's some touch points that are a little more sensitive to others, especially when it comes to marketing. I think, you know, Michael made a good point. You know, depending on where you are in the state, you may be able to present politically, be very conservative, or you may be more liberal. And you know, people might not want to talk about politics whatsoever. So the hesitant, I think, may shoot way up as opposed to engaging or experimenting. When I think when it comes to the, you know, you mentioned, you know, race, or if mentioned age, I think these things will definitely shift depending on people's comfort level. What I find interesting though is how as a whole, when we talk just about gender identity and sexuality here, individually, we're all very much in that D and E area. And that's how we see ourselves. But then how come we can't get the other people, you know, the industry or the company we work for to be more into that experimenting, engaging? When will that trend shift? Is it as we get older in the industry and people who are the higher ups, the more seasoned, you know, CEOs, staff, as they move out, and you know, is that what we have to wait for, or is there actions that we can take now to help that shift?
You know, one thing that I would share with you, Mike, is that some of it's industry specific. Oftentimes the creative types, right, they tend to be in that D&E space, right? And because it's how they operate, that's where they get information. It's how they organize the data, right? We've got 10 of these and 10 of those. Oh, they're equal. We got 5 of those. You know what? Just because it's 5 doesn't mean it's less. It just means it's 5. Maybe we should bring it out because it's 5 instead of diminishing because it's 5. So the creative people that those spaces, those industries tend to have that a different mindset around that. And then they're also exposed, right? And when we think about the different age brackets, the exposure of our children who are 7, 8, 9, 10 right now to data and information is massive related to our friends who might, instead of being 7 or 8, they're 70 or 80. The exposure matters. E. Dunn Kimball.
Yeah, I wanted to just share that and talking about exposure, I'm gonna like open myself up a little bit. I feel like you always want to be in like that, let's just say the E zone, right? Like we always want to say that this is where we're at and this is where we're working really hard towards. And I know that we have a leadership team here at Community Credit Union that is just really actively participating to continue to get our entire team to that location. I feel like that it comes in strides, like it's happening a little bit slower for some than it is for others, just depending on interactions and position and everything. Personally, I don't, no matter where we set the bar, I personally feel like I'm always going to be in like the C area, the investigating area, just because I'm not in somebody else's shoes, and I'm always going to do what I can to try to understand another position. And like with even like cultural migrations and things like that over time, as things continue to change, those conversations are going to continue to change, and who we're targeting and how we're targeting it is going to continue to change. And as an example, we have a credit builder loan, like in the last couple of months, that we've been really trying to work with a lot of our like Somali community that is in our Lewiston area. And you know, you obviously want to make a connection to somebody so they're comfortable to what you're advertising. And it goes beyond just what you're offering here on paper, but it's really about building relationships with people and building trust. And so building trust happens this way. Building trust happens when you're out in the community and you're asking those questions, and how can we best serve you? How can we help you? And so, yeah, I think I just wanted to say, I personally, like, I would love to say that I'm advanced, but I'm always going to continue to ask, and I'm always going to be in like that investigative state, because I just wasn't raised and brought up in that area. And the only way I know is by asking.
So as we're getting to the top of the hour here, I want to make sure I land the plane really clearly on one area, and that is you get to be wherever you are. It's okay. Because of how we sometimes have to show information, we have to show something first and something last, and something at the top and something at the bottom, and so we can develop top and bottom biases. We can develop first and last biases. The engaging is not better than discomfort. Hesitant is not worse than investigating. It is. It's just an is. The question is, where do you want to be? Where do you want your organization? Where do you want your team? Where do you want your family? Where do you want your kids to be? And if I happen to be hesitant, but I would really, really like to be experimenting, what is the plan that I can execute, the roadmap that I can build to get me from here to here? That's what we spend a lot of time working with companies on. They'll say, look, James, we're just in this investigating place, especially when it comes to fill in the blank, let's call it gender and sexuality. Can you build out a roadmap for us to get from here to here? It may take 18 months. It may take 24 months. It may be a continual journey, and that is okay. If we start to identify people in a group, and that group is felt, received, characterized, painted as less than, as those people, we get these tribal mentalities, and tribes fight each other. I just want to make sure I'm really clear. You get to be wherever you are, and good for you. Question is, where do you want to be? You get to be a part of a team, wherever that team is. Where do you want your team to be? You're a part of an organization, whatever that organization is. Where do you want that organization to be? And then, are you willing to commit to the work and the time and other resources it takes to get you from here to here over time? With that being said, I want to thank you all for spending a little bit of your day with me. Mike, thank you for the invitation. And I really hope that people received something from what it is that we're trying to share here, and really keeping the conversations moving around this idea of inclusivity. And that it's not easy, it's not done, but if we can continue to have tough conversations, sometimes scratchy, sometimes uncomfortable, then I think we're continuing to make that progress. But again, you get to be wherever you are. That's great. Question is, where would you like to be? And then we commit to doing the work in between. Mike?
Thank you very much, James. This was excellent. I have to tell you, one of the things I pulled away this time that I forgot about when we met back in October was the inclusivity includes exclusivity. And I think that's a very big, important thing for us as marketers to remember and to recall. When you're thinking about your marketing message, your marketing visuals, are you just making your message to check the boxes to include everybody? But remember that you are excluding someone in that, and keeping all that in mind.
Yeah. One of the comments I made from the stage then was like, and I've said this a few times, so I'll share it with you all, especially given the roles that you have. There are people in different communities, they know that they are not well represented in your neighborhood, in your geography. They know that. But then when the marketing piece shows up, they see themselves equally represented. And it's slightly scratchy, right? Most of the Black folks I know are not a biracial guy, ethnically ambiguous kind of guy with some interesting hair. Most of them I know aren't like that. And in many communities, that number's 5%, 7%, 10%, maybe it's 40%. Then maybe it makes more sense, right? We have to be careful about over-indexing. The pendulum swinging too far one way, then you got to bring it back to where it's here. Unless you have a really good reason for over-indexing. Oh no, we're going to focus on guys today. We're going to focus on men between 28 and 45, right? Because those are often their childbearing years, and we want these fathers in our space. Okay, you've got a really good reason, and you've taken inclusivity and exclusivity into account in your decision making. Sorry about that, Mike. Got on a little tangent there. Got a little happy.
That was perfect. I completely agree with you. But say, any questions for James before we close up here today? Not hearing anything. Okay, just a couple things I'd like to bring up before we end the session for the day. Our next marketing council workshop will be held on Thursday, August 24th, and we're going to be hearing 10 tech hacks to simplify your life. It's presented by Abby McGilvery. She'll be presenting her 10 hacks that help you basically with your day, whether it be social media management, graphic design, or just keeping yourself organized. There are 10 hacks that she's found, and she's going to be presenting that to us. It will be another virtual session, as again, it'll be August 24th. And lastly, just remind everybody that our campaign for ending hunger is our $100,000, almost said 10,000, $100,000 challenge is going on this month. And we are just about a week away from the end of it, and we're only about halfway there. So thank you for all of your credit unions that you've participated so far, spreading the message, but please keep it up, keep that message out there. Try any fundraising that you're going to do. You have until Monday, July 10th to get the numbers into Jen and her team for that. And hopefully we can crush that $100,000 mark. It's a big part of our yearly fundraising. Last year, we broke the 1 million mark for the very first time, and we'd like to do that again this year if we can. So please spread the word to your members, into your staff. The website is campaignforendinghunger.org, as you all know, and we really appreciate your help. Thank you very much for joining us today, everyone, and we will be talking again soon.